What is going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back again for some more unpopular opinions for you guys. Episode 2 of this series during your break. I know you guys are desperate for some Tottenham content as there's no game this weekend. So here's some more unpopular opinions. Joining me yet again is Barnaby Slater from the Spurred On podcast. And we've got some more unpopular opinions to get through. You know the drill, so let's get straight into it. The first one we're going to be looking at is, again, MFXRCH. He says, Dele needs to play left wing or back up to Maddison. He doesn't suit a right wing needs under Ange. A front three of Dele, Son and Werner would work much better with both wingers being able to cross cutbacks on their stronger side. Yeah, I think Dele can do the role on the right. I actually think in the first 10 games and up until actually like the new year, he was actually having a fairly good season. I think a fairly underrated season. But there are always going to be... Look, he's obviously not a player with unbelievable pace, and that's always going to be held against him in that position, and especially in a role which maybe you get a lot of opportunities to take on your fullback and he's not the best at it. But for you, when you look at Dele, do you see his best position as being on that right wing, or do you think the times we've seen him in central, or maybe we could even try him on the left? Well,
he has said, hasn't he, that he thinks his best position is as a 10. And I do see him as a good backup to Maddison. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me if, because of his injury record, we let Lo Celso go in the summer as a result, and kind of have Dele as the backup for a 10 and, you know, available to play on the right wing as well. I don't really get the left wing thing because he's not going to have the pace to get round his fullback, and so it would just, for me, end up with him kind of playing it back to his own fullback quite a lot, or a bit into midfield.
Maybe the argument would be stop him cutting inside. He goes on the outside rather than cutting inside, and so if
he's not got the pace to get around the outside. That's the thing. So it's kind of different going inside on the right, where he's coming onto his natural foot. And what he is brilliant at is those crosses to the far post, crosses for Richarlison. And certainly at the start of his Tottenham career, he was also getting some great shots off and scoring some goals that way. What I love about Dele is he's just so strong on the ball, uses that big arse of his to kind of get around people and have people bouncing off him all the time. I think he's a really talented player. People forget he's only 23, still got a lot of learning and growing to do. And I think he'll probably become a Spurs legend in the end, Dele. But it's just about, I think, getting enough players around him where maybe, especially against teams who play deep blocks, opposition are worried about other players so much that it frees up Dele, gives him a lot of space to do what he's brilliant at, which is kind of his passing, crossing, shooting.
And to be fair to Dele, I think the stats say this season in the Premier League, I think he's near the top for actually chances created. And maybe if some of our finishing would have been better, you know, maybe people wouldn't be talking about him changing position because his assist numbers would be up. But I think overall he's got like 6 goals, 2 assists this season so far. I think he's doing okay. Yeah. And for me, like, I see him as a bit, his position, he's a bit like a Bernardo Silva. Like when he plays on the wing, he can do that role, creating chances. He's never going to be this out-and-out winger, which maybe you could argue we need, but I think he can do a good job on the right wing. And I think as well, when he goes into that number 10, he looks very comfortable, and especially in those tight spaces where he can hold people off. And he's really good, like wriggling out of the situations. I think he can do that as well. So I think if we look at him as that kind of player, instead of always comparing him to other wingers and like what he can't do, I think we're better off for it.
I think the Bernardo Silva comparison is really good because I could totally see Dele playing for Man City. He would, you know, just 1 and 2 touch stuff, really technically gifted, great vision. You could totally see him fitting into a team like that. At Spurs, he's kind of, you know, playing a position that's not his first choice position, but yeah, as you said, the stats don't lie, and he's doing really well. And yes, dare I say, if we had a certain English number 9 still in the team, I think people would be raving more about Dele's season than they are at the moment.
Mo Mohammed says Son's best position is striker. Even if Richarlison's on fire, he should never start over him. You don't move your best player from their best position. That simple. We discussed this a bit in the last video, but what I want to ask is, do you think Son is now a striker? Is that his best position for you?
I mean, for a striker, he hasn't played up front for Spurs very much over his career, has he? I mean, what I will say is he is the best finisher at the club. He is an unbelievably good finisher. Do I think he's brilliant at hold-up play? I don't. With his back to goal, it bounces off him quite a lot, as it does Richarlison. But in terms of who you want, if James Maddison is threading a through ball, you want Sonny on the end of that, that's for sure. But as I think I said in the last video, Ange sees them at training each day, and there's a reason why he's keeping Rishi at number 9 at the moment and Sonny out wide. but maybe that'll change soon enough. I don't know. I don't personally think we're making enough chances for the striker. The only one I can think of, we had a chance where Richarlison went through on his left in a couple of games ago.
His Brighton,
Keeper made a good save. Sonny probably would have scored that. So on that level, do you want your best finisher in the best positions? Probably. But at the moment, I don't think we're making like eons of chances that Richarlison's missing. And actually what Richarlison's really good at is those first-time finishes from the low crosses, which when I was at the open training session last week, they did that drill over and over and over again. It's no coincidence that we're scoring so many goals like that because they did that drill for 25 minutes over and over, get the player to the byline, cut it back along the ground, Richarlison to finish.
Yeah, and I think that kind of skill is very underappreciated and very important, and especially when you're playing against a low block, because what you're not going to get against a low block is like time on the ball in the box, and you need to be able to get a shot off very quickly. Yep. That's what Rishi's very good at. I personally, when I look at Son, I do think he's a striker now. I think that is his best position at 31 years of age. I think he's adapted his game so that, and I think we should, to get the best out of Sonny, I think you need to get him in front of goal as many times as possible. And I think the best way to do that would be him up front. I feel like when he plays on the left, he's just not getting in enough goal scoring positions and he's on the periphery too much. Yes, I think there are games where maybe he can be like kind of marked out the game, and because he's not physical enough to get away from defenders sometimes. But if a chance falls to him, you know he's going to bury it. And what I think from the stats I read this season for him, when he's played up front, it's 12 games, 9 goals and 3 assists. Right. So I think that tells me he definitely knows how to play that role at this stage of his career.
Could you ever envisage Sonny knocking on Ange's door and saying, actually, I'm a striker now, I only want to play striker? It's just not his way, is it?
I don't think so. I reckon he still believes he can be a winger. Right. I just look at him and I'm not seeing his best games out wide. I'm not seeing him being at his best. Or I guess the main point is we're not getting the best out of his best attribute in that position. Yeah, Daniel James says, bar Son, we have the worst frontline attacking options out of the top half of the table. That is very controversial. The worst front line in the top half.
Oh wow! Doesn't even mean the top six. What? So including Chelsea.
Including Chelsea.
Worse than Nicholas Jackson, who I think might be the worst footballer in the history of time.
So we have, who do we have apart from Son? We have Werner, Johnson, Richarlison, Kulusevski, and Solomon. I mean, they're not amazing. Look, it's good.
We scored loads of goals.
We have scored loads of goals, and obviously, I think Son does have like 18 goal contributions. I mean, who's in the top half? I would argue we have better than West Ham.
Brentford in the top half.
West Ham we have better. They're in the top half.
Okay,
I know
so would you
Kudus
rather,
and Bowen.
Daniel James Moffat, would you rather have Jared Bowen, Mikel Antonio, and I guess is it Paquetá? He plays more in the 8.
Oh, to be fair, Kudus, Bowen, and Paquetá in a 3. It's a pretty good 3. I have to give them that.
But how many goals have West Ham scored this season? I mean,
they've only scored 36, but is that Moyes?
They've scored 36. We scored 52.
Yeah. But he's saying barring Son, so you have to take Son out the equation.
No, I refuse to do that. Okay, who else? Chelsea, and then
Chelsea, Newcastle, you got Isaac, Wilson, Gordon.
Yeah, they've got good options. Brighton are good, obviously.
Pedro.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think they're all similar. They're all similar. Those kind of our best 3 is similar to all of those best 3, but yeah, I mean, this brings me back to the kind of, you know, if Ivan Toney becomes available, should we be going for him instead of, you know, to play instead of Richarlison? I'd be tempted, but not at like 80 million. It would have to be kind of 40, 50 million. I don't see Spurs doing that. I don't know. It's a bit of a tangent.
I think we need a winger. I think we should be spending big on a winger. I actually don't feel that getting a new striker is as important as other people feel. I think Son and Richarlison both are currently scoring goals in that position when they play there. Yeah. So I don't see it being a massive issue. But what I do see is all our wingers are kind of struggling a bit, especially to create chances. Actually, apart from actually Kulusevski, who's kind of consistently creating, the other wingers in that position are struggling to create chances consistently. So I think that's where the problem lies at the moment. But in terms of our attacking options are worse in the top half, I don't think it's worse in the top half. Is it worse in the top 6? I mean, there could be a case for it if you take out Son. There could be a case for it, but that's like saying, you know, you take out Salah and how good are Liverpool's options? I don't know, like, you know.
Although they kept winning when Salah was injured. To be fair, there's been some talk today in the press that Wolves are looking for 80 million for Neto. Is he the winger you would go for?
Yes, not for 80 million, but he is. If I look at a winger, if I take just pure quality, if I take out his injuries out of it and everything, I think he's like the perfect winger for us. Absolutely. I can't think of a better player than someone like Neto, because he can play both left and right equally as good, and he can go inside and outside both equally as good, and he's got 2 really good feet as well. I've been astonished by how good he's been this season, and I've been blown away. So I think he would be my number one, like, if the price was right and like he passes a medical and like he's not doesn't prove to be injury prone. But I obviously think there's a lot of good wingers out there, but I think I'm obsessed with like how good he could be at Spurs. I think.
Okay.
I love him.
Yeah.
Edo Uriandra says, if we give Dele Alli another chance, he'll be better than Timo Werner and maybe better than Richarlison. Maybe again another example of absence make the heart grow fonder. Obviously, he's not. I feel so bad for Dele at the moment because he's basically not playing, because if he plays, Everton are going to have to pay 10 million.
He's injured though as well, I think.
I don't know if that's an excuse or not. He's been injured for a long time now. They said at the beginning of the season he was getting back to full fitness, and then they've said he's had setbacks potentially. Yeah. I reckon they're not playing him because they don't want to pay the 10 million. Yeah. I think that's about the worst case. So who knows what he could be doing if he was able to play right now. But let's be honest, he wasn't having a great time of it at the end of his Spurs career. So
I mean, to answer the question, Edo, Dele Alli is a completely different player, in my opinion, to Timo Werner and Richarlison. So it's kind of difficult to compare them. Dele at his best is an absolutely unbelievably talented late runner into the box. And then in terms of his instinctive finishing, that's what he was absolutely brilliant at. So making late runs, Lampard-esque late runs, and then instinctive finishing. But actually, a lot of the time with Spurs, and you're right, Sim, especially towards the end, it was the simple things that he really struggled with. The amount of times you'd see Dele, miscontrol a 5-yard pass or something really simple. It's almost like, because he's like a street baller, it's when he's playing off the cuff and he's not thinking about it, that's when he's at his best. But I agree with you, it's sad that he hasn't played for so long, and obviously he was in Turkey for a bit and that didn't happen, and of course we all saw the interview, which is incredibly sad. But I would love Dele to get back. I would bring him home, get him training at Spurs under Ange, but I would never expect to see him, even if that happened, playing on the left side or as a number 9, even as a false 9. So I don't think he fits Ange's system. It's not going to happen like that. But I would love to see him get up to somewhere near his best football playing for somebody else. Yeah,
I really hope he finds a way to get his career back on track. Big Six Bias says Spurs as a club are massively overhyped by the media and are in fact not much more than an upper mid-table club. I mean, I always get a bit like, I guess the word would be confused by the whole chat about big club. Who's a big club? What is a big club? How do you define big club? Like, I guess the whole point of being a big club is so like you have the pool to bring in players and like you winning trophies and things like that. And when you talk about that, Spurs are a big club in the Premier League. Like we do. Like we're a much bigger pool than like, anyone else apart from maybe obviously the other top 5 of the big 6. Yeah. So on that basis, we are a big club. When you talk about trophies, we've won the 6th amount of trophies. When you talk about money earned, I think recently there was they showed we're the most profitable team in the league, or we gained one of the most revenues now, apart from maybe Man United in the Premier League. Yep. So on what basis are we not a big club? Just the fact that we recently haven't won trophies, I guess.
Big Six Bias says are in fact not much more than an upper mid-table club. But what I would say is the only time we've been an upper mid-table club was last season when we finished 8th. If you look at the 10 seasons before that, then Spurs have been 4th, 5th, or 6th every season. Is that not right? I'm pretty sure that's right. But in the Champions League, I think probably 5, 6 times. So the stats don't really back that up. Now, in terms of being massively overhyped by the media, I wonder if what you're talking about is, how many articles there are about Spurs. And the reality is it's supply and demand. The reason you see more articles about Arsenal than any other club is because Arsenal have the busiest fan base online and they get the most clicks. And especially over the last kind of 15 years at the back end of Wenger, through Emery and into Arteta before they became good again, which let's not forget, they only became good again last season. Yeah. Like literally last season. The season before that, we came above them. And then last season, it just all came together. And now they're good because they've trusted the process with Arteta and he's got the squad together that he wants. But Spurs are in the media a lot because they have a lot of fans. And the reason we have a lot of fans is because all the things you said, as a legacy club of being a member of the traditional kind of big 6 or whatever it was back in the 80s and before that, But Everton, I always say, look at Everton. Everton and Spurs in my childhood were swimming in the same waters. Everton have won a FA Cup since we have. They won it in 1995 or whatever it was. And Everton have just dropped off a cliff. And I even say about Everton, when lots of Spurs fans talk about how we need to just splash the cash. Everton splashed the cash. They got a new owner in. They spent upwards of 500, 600, 700 million pounds. And what have they got to show for it? Nothing. 10-point deduction, another charge coming their way, relegation fodder, and having a manager in who plays basically long ball just to try and save them. So ask yourself, when you think Tottenham are a joke club or an upper mid-table club, ask yourself, would you rather be in Everton's fans' footsteps? I promise you, I have Everton family, Everton friends. They would all rather be Spurs fans right now. Yeah. So, I think Spurs have grown incredibly well and are continuing to grow, and we are set to become one of the biggest clubs in this country, especially when Man City get relegated next season.
Couldn't agree more. DR says, Skip should be given a chance in the position of Basuma. He looks like he keeps improving game by game every time he comes on. Given Basuma's, form, I mean, obviously he wasn't terrible against Wolves, but did Skip show enough in that little run he had in January to say that he should be getting more chances right now?
No. So I'll be quite simple with that. So I did a video on the Spurred On podcast this week because we were linked with James Garner at Everton.
Okay,
interesting. And Everton fans love him, and he looks good. He played quite well in both games against Spurs. But I said on that video that I think potentially if Oliver Skip were given a run of games, and I don't necessarily mean at Spurs, but I mean in a Premier League club, at Premier League level, then maybe we would look at him in a similar way to how people are looking at James Garner at the moment. I think the thing that Skippy is missing is games and rhythm. He's a great player. We all know the story about the Dutch under-21 team and Frankie de Jong saying he's like a Dutch player. Norwich fans said he's the best player. He's been there for years. He needs rhythm and games, and I think he needs to leave Spurs to get that. I think there's a talent there, but I think he's being kind of held back at Spurs by the amount of midfield options we've got there. Every manager loves him. Every manager since Poch's absolutely loves Skippy. And I read something today that said if Spurs get in Europe next season, then Skip probably has to stay because you need to have 4 homegrown kind of club-trained players. But I think, because I love him, he needs to go somewhere. I could see him doing well at a Brentford. I could see him doing well at a Brighton even.
Bournemouth, maybe?
At a Bournemouth. One of those, ironically, upper mid-table clubs. I could see Skippy doing really well at. And, lots of people used to abuse Harry Winks. Leicester fans love Harry Winks. He's playing brilliantly for them. So there's a lot of kind of, if Spurs players, especially in midfield, aren't like, flair players and genius players, right? They get to stick, especially if they're homegrown. I think there's a good player in Skippy, but I just can't see it happening at Spurs at the moment. Yeah,
I agree in terms of what he's missing. Like, he's also a player, you can see the way he plays, he needs that rhythm to find, when he's passing the ball, when he's collecting, when he's got players around him to appreciate the space. That all comes with just finding a rhythm with game time, and that is something he's really, really lacked. Bentang Cooking says,
nice name.
Ange should be more ruthless with his subs and make more at half time. A lot of people, in terms of that point, a lot of people have accused Ange of not being able to change games, always sticking to the same way when he makes his subs.
No
plan B, not quick enough, as this guy is saying. What do you make of that kind of criticism of Ange? Like, do you think he makes good use of his subs? Does he change things up in games to, try and influence the dynamics, or is he too stuck to how he wants to play?
I think, if you take away the Wolves game, we've been behind in a number of recent games and come back to win most of them. And Ange has made substitutions. Look, it's difficult. Firstly, it's only been the last 4 or 5 games where we've had options off the bench where you're like, oh, at least we've got some game changers on the bench. So it's an easy stick to beat manager with if you lose a game. Do you know what I mean? And, I think a lot of people think back to when Jose Mourinho first came in the Premier League and he made like 3 substitutions after 20 minutes of a game. And it's like...
He did that at Spurs once. We were 2-0 down against Olympiacos and he made
I think Dyer came...
after 20 minutes he made a couple of subs.
And it's like, if that's happening, then something seriously wrong is,
right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not easy for a manager, I think, to say, oh, I messed this up so badly that I have to make radical substitutions. look, there's an argument to it. Like I said earlier, do I think maybe we could have got Lo Celso on in the second half of that game and had more creativity in midfield? I do, but also I don't know how fit Lo Celso is. He'd not been training for very long. Ange has all the stats and all the details. I don't, and I don't think we're necessarily blessed with real kind of real huge game changers on the bench. Like against the low block, he brought Brennan Johnson on, and I was like, well, you're not going to get outside your man. He's not explosively accelerating past people like that. He needs space to run into. So I think Benton Cooking has an argument, but also I don't fully agree with it or fully disagree with it. So I'd sit on the fence.
What I would say is, like, in terms of recently in the subs, I think back to the Brighton game, we were building some really good momentum in that game. Then he makes a triple substitution and it took the wind out of ourselves. You look at the Everton game, we were on top in that game and he made some subs and we lost control. And then you look at the Wolves game, he made a triple sub and it didn't really impact the game positively. I think he put Werner up front, Sonny out wide, and nothing really happened. We weren't able to hurt them. So maybe it's a recent thing, recency bias. People are looking at it thinking he needs to do better with subs. But I agree. I think we've seen enough evidence of us being able to change games and gain control in games. So I don't know if it's a thing of Ange having a problem. Trini Boy says Ange ball isn't this free-flowing football that we have been accredited with. Is Ange ball overblown? Is it not the beautiful football that maybe we're getting all the praise for?
I just think when you come up against teams who play 11 men behind the ball, it's impossible to be that free flowing, right? So
look at Man City against Brentford. They
exactly
can do it.
What Ange ball is really about is sucking on the opposition, like bringing the opposition towards you and being so brave with the ball that you go bang, 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 and you're through. That's not possible when the opposition are playing on their own 18-yard box or deeper. And if you think of the last few games we've had, which I admit were games that I thought we can win all of these games and go into a good run, but they've pretty much all been against teams who played like that. So Wolves did it really well, Brentford did it really well, Everton did it, So I can see why if you take those games into account, you'd be like, oh, this football isn't that great. And it was a bit turgid. It's like a bit side to side, quite slow. But, me on the watch along, I'm asking them to pick up the tempo, like more tempo. But actually, there's nowhere for them to go.
Because they're already in the final third.
So the thing that kind of surprised me actually more about that is why weren't we getting more crosses in? We had Richarlison in the 9, Decky on the ball a lot. Get more crosses in, do something different, get more shots from outside the box, get some deflections. They're the things that I would probably improve on against low block teams. But I think when it comes to that Villa game, it'll be more like the Ange ball because both teams will play in a similar way, trying to kind of beat each other's press, and it'll be a high tempo, more enjoyable game to watch. Jacob
says Ndombele deserves another chance. That is a very unpopular opinion.
Fool's Day.
I don't know who else would. Well, if anyone's going to agree with it, it will be me because I was the one who was really championing him to be back in the team.
Have you seen a picture, Jacob?
Yes.
Have you seen a picture of Tanguy Ndombele recently? The guy is eating all of Istanbul. He is the most gifted technical player we've had at Spurs probably since Gaza. Like maybe Luka Modric, right? But in terms of his ability to be a man and to do a trick, and it's unbelievable. But then he just watches it. He's like, he does it. And he's like, oh, I'm so good. I don't need to do that for another 10 minutes. And that was, I'm afraid, a terrible misjudgment of scouting by Tottenham Hotspur to buy that player because there was clearly a reason why the teams above us hadn't taken him. And we thought, well, he's a Spurs-esque player, and he did play that brilliant game against. And he did play that brilliant game against Man City for Lyon?
Yeah,
he played for. But there was a reason why only I think 3 seasons before he was like playing in the French 2nd or 3rd division, and it's because he has an attitude problem. And I'm sorry, Jacob, Ndombele does not deserve another chance, and I would cut our losses and rip up his contract, pay him off.
Yeah, I think the fact that even, you hear some of what the manager from Galatasaray says, and he says, Ndombele just doesn't try, basically. He's like sick of him already, it seems. And if you can't even try your hardest to try and kind of put your career back on track in a much easier league like the Turkish league, then there's just no hope. And obviously, he looks completely overweight. Apparently, I was reading some reports he gets found with junk food in his hotel and stuff like that. I don't know how true they are. Apparently, he likes to eat too many burgers, I've heard.
Yeah, I think Ange was willing to give him a chance at the beginning in pre-season, wasn't he? And then he turned up late to a training session.
I think there was a bit of a sliding doors moment right at the start of pre-season where he actually, I remember, the Spurs social media team were like putting out a lot of videos on him, like he was looking great in training. Ange was talking really well of him, and then on the eve of the West Ham game, he picked up an injury in training, ruled him out, and then Lo Celso played instead, and he kind of took his chance, and then kind of Ndombele never got another look in, and then things kind of spiraled, and we end up letting him go. So maybe if he didn't get that injury and he played well, who knows what would have happened, but that didn't happen, and now we're sitting at the same Ndombele.
But also, we're talking about a player who, during the pandemic, Jose Mourinho had to go to a park with him to get him to train. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever heard a story like that in the history of football? It could only happen with Tanguy Ndombele. He clearly wasn't, like, was he not turning up for the Zoom training sessions or something?
Probably.
So Jose actually went to his house and took him to a park.
And they got punished for it.
It's the guy's just picking up his money. And I used to laugh at Chelsea. It was back in the day with like Winston Bogard went to Chelsea and just picked up his money every week, didn't play. And now we've got that player. It's so frustrating because he's a genius. He is a genius. But unfortunately, believes his own hype. Not good enough.
All right, well, that is it for episode 2 of Unpopular Opinion. Stay tuned. There will be further episodes coming. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.